Hi to everybody, and thank you for coming online. We actually, as part of the Queen City 15 Gallery, together with the 330 Gallery, Mary Reynolds here, and other artists, Joanna Frank from Barrett Art Center, we actually organized this project. It's called We Rise Poughkeepsie. We wanted to celebrate the centennial of the 19th Amendment for the women voting rights. And also this year we think is a particular year because we have an election, we have a census, and so we think it's important to remind people that we have a right and a duty to exercise our vote. And so we came up with an idea of having a series of events, different sides, art event, panels, movies, history lecture, and all this and more. We will be running this program until September 19th, so that there are many more things to come. So I will encourage you to go to our Facebook page, which is We Rise Poughkeepsie, and see if there is anything else that can be interesting for you. And said that, I want to say thank you for everybody to being here. Thank you to Linda and to our panelists. And I will just turn to Linda.
Okay, welcome everybody. I put a little note in the chat, but I will let you know that if you could please mute yourselves for the duration of our conversation, and I'm talking about our audience, not our panelists. And then as we get towards the end, I promise that we'll have an opportunity that you can ask questions either directly to one artist or to the panel at large. And so that, I think that's going to be a very interesting part of this conversation. So with that, I would love to introduce, we have 4 amazing women here tonight, and I want to give you all just a little bit of background on them. Nancy Azara has been described as a feminist spiritualist whose production is a testament to memories and desires, to landscapes of the mind and soul with a reference to nature and the architectural. But way back in 2007, it's not that long ago, but she started meeting with former students and teachers at the New York Feminist Art Institute, and they began a series of conversations, and it had to do with the artists that were, had met with some success and some of the younger ones who were just starting out. So they called these conversations Represent, which was a series of intergenerational dialogues. Nancy has work in collections including the National Gallery of Women in the Arts, LACMA, which is Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Met, and MoMA, just to name a few. I won't even go into she's also an author. Kara Bledsoe is a researcher, an archivist, a visual artist, and a content creator with specialties in musetech, Black studies, cultural studies, and digital humanities. Currently, she has work featured in Arts Mid-Hudson's Reflection exhibition. She's exhibited at the Barrett Art Center and currently serves on their board of directors. Elizabeth Liz Dahmen. So Liz is the founding artistic director of the Hudson Valley Performing Arts Lab, which she calls the Lab. I saw the most amazing thing that she did, and I can't believe it was just a few months ago, but it was before the lockdown happened. She directed a piece called Performing Art. It was a devised performance collaboration between the Lab and the Dorsky Museum at SUNY New Paltz. It was, I think it's the future of how we will reawaken interest in museums, to tell you the truth. I was so impressed with that. She is currently also directing the Lab's first ever remote devised performance after doing a content generating game called Play to Play. She's the author of numerous theater pieces. She's been working as a teaching artist for Hudson Valley Shakespeare Festival for the last 5 years. And she helps middle and high school students approach Shakespeare studies from an artist and actor's perspective and has numerous acting credits. Julia Santos Solomon is a contemporary Dominican artist, creating paintings, sculptures, and digital media for over 40 years. She's shaped generations of successful Latinx artists as a founding member of Altos de Chavon School of Design, and she has taught fashion illustrations and design at Parsons School of Design in New York City. Her work has been exhibited and collected nationally and abroad, and she's represented in permanent collections at the Latin Art Museum, Hudson River Museum, Indiana University Museum, Museo de Arte Moderno, Altos de Chavon Foundation, and her work is archived at the Smithsonian Archives of American Art and the Dominican Studies Institute at CUNY. So we're sitting amongst some pretty amazing women here, and I was hoping that we could have just a little chat this evening about where their path has taken them in their artwork. Some of their paths have lasted much longer than others, but I feel like there's so many similarities in the paths that women take. So I'd love to kick this off by asking Nancy, who I think, because your work spreads out in such a broad direction, a little bit about your path and how you started out and then how you started to connect with younger women and had that intergenerational discussion.
Well, I was, excuse me, I was part of the early women's movement in 1968, 69, 70. And we did a lot of consciousness raising. And that was after I finished art school and was a working artist. So I was trying to find my vision. And really what it was I wanted to say as an artist. And one of the things we explored, because the Women's Nation just started, and I'm not for this at this round, and much of our history had disappeared or been lost. And some of the women that I was friends with would go to junk shops and thrift shops and just explore all the books that they would have in big piles and find things that had never been even looked at, but did get published enough, would go right out of print. So that was the beginning of my connection to the women's movement in a formal way. I think all of us felt that we were anomalies and that we were not a part of the community of artists, because people would say things like, "Oh, you're an artist. Wow, you'd make a great wife to an artist." And so that was common. And if you took objection to it, they would say you just didn't have a sense of humor. Humor is an interesting political tool. It has been used for centuries in different satire. And so there's a power that's there embedded in that. We had individual. Computer has said that my connection to the internet is unstable and it's been raining all day, and I'm in Woodstock. So just so you know, that if somehow I check out,
if suddenly
just stay on the line.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. So Julia, I know what Nancy just said about finding a vision. That is so important, but I think also being taken seriously as an artist, even though you are a woman. I mean, I think, is that something that was a main driver in your beginning path?
When I was coming up, there were no Latin artists for me to connect with. at the time. And I was a hybrid, I was an immigrant from another country, and I was straddling two different cultures. And for me, the arts gave me a way to express not just my emotions, but to help me find my way in the world. And I mean, I was of color, I was female, and it was not particularly popular to be an artist at that time. I had a lot of friends who were male artists and a lot of women who kind of came in and out of the arts. They came in and out. But I had to stay because for me it was about survival, emotional survival. It was about feeling a calling. It was about feeling challenged in the most extreme way. So for those reasons, I was always drawn to creating art. And it was something that I did sometimes on my own, sometimes in company, but it wasn't until much later in my life that it became clear that this was my place, and that I had to, because when I was young, I tried different venues. I tried graphic design so that I could pay my bills. I tried publishing. I tried so many different, I ended up with teaching, because in teaching, I could really fire my students. I could give them that strength that I felt inside of myself. I could transmit that to them. And I got very lucky, because when I went to Altos de Chabón, we were inaugurating a brand new concept, which was a design school in the Caribbean and in South America. And the kids that came there were so talented, but it allowed me the opportunity to really channel my passion and pass it on to them. And they are a very vibrant generation in the United States right now. I'm very, very, very proud of them. But what ended happening for me is that I did not have support as a Dominican female making art in New York City, but by being part of creating that Chabón generation, I ended up being absorbed into their community. So I was absorbed into a community that I helped create. So it's been very, very, very interesting.
That is a very interesting point that you're making right there. Is I think the ability to teach and to launch something like that. I know a lot of artists start off with teaching, and sometimes they decide to leave teaching. And I know Liz does a lot of teaching, so I'd love to hear you weigh in on this.
So I grew up with my parents my mother was a teacher, and the idea was, yeah, we'll support you in your theater stuff because you seem to really like that. And I was always drawn to acting and like doing that. But there was a very strong message of, well, what are you going to do for money? What are you going to do for money? And so I was very lucky to go to an art school and study acting in college, but it was kind of like with the caveat of, yeah, this is just something you're doing now, but seriously, Liz, what are you gonna do for money? So no. And anyway, but then just to connect that to teaching, as soon as I graduated from undergrad, I got a job that would pay for grad school at a university. So I got a master's in education so that I would know what I was going to do for money. And I was a visual art teacher for 6 years at a high school in the city, which had nothing to do with performance, but the school didn't have any performance work. And my degree was in educational theater. Anyway, so that was certainly a foundation for me of teaching, but so much of teaching is not about finding your own voice or figuring out how you want to be an artist. It's so much nurturing, especially because I was quite young at the time. I was, teaching in my early mid-20s. I probably had a voice, but I didn't think about it. It was just about how can I help people with their technique, really was how can I help them learn to use tools. And it wasn't until probably like 2 years ago or 3 years ago that I started wondering what it was that I had to offer as an individual artist. And I definitely, one other point. In college, when I got to college, I came out in high school, but when I got to NYU and I was in New York and there was a very vibrant queer community, I became much more interested in being a part of that community and figuring out what my identity was all about than I did about going to school. So I spent those sort of formative art years really just doing every kind of queer LGBT thing that I could get my hands on. And anyway, so then fast forward 25 years, I guess, or no, I can't do math. Anyway, fast forward many years. And it was, just about 4 years ago when I realized, like, no one's going to invite me to the party that I want to go to. Acting is about thresholds, is about being able to show that you're pretty enough or tall enough or, whatever enough that you can get cast in a show. And so I was like, if I want to be in the show, I got to make the show.
That's quite a revelation right there. I think the whole thing about community and who gets support and who doesn't get support. So Kara, I know that you, like I said, before everybody came on board, you're juggling all kinds of plates, and how would you say that impacts you as an artist?
Well, I think so. I was listening to Liz and Julia talk about how they had to create the community that they wanted to be a part of. And I feel like where I am right now, I'm searching for those communities to be a part of. And that has been really difficult because I have all these other things going on where I'm dealing with the question of, like, how are you going to make money? How are you going to support yourself? Like Liz was saying. So I do have 9-to-5 job. My boss is on the call right now. Hi, Adrian. And that takes up a significant amount of time. I'm in and out of grad school right now, doing as much of it as I can while I'm working. And that is also a significant time drain, but I'm committed to it. I'm on the board at Barrett, which I love doing. And with everything that's happening with COVID-19, there's so many changes, so many unexpected things coming up. And it's been a really amazing learning experience to be on the board at this time. And so there's just so much happening. And on top of all of that, I am still, as a young artist, trying to figure out what I'm trying to say, as other people have mentioned, and trying to make work that I think is worth the time that I'm putting into it. Even though, you can make something and it's terrible and you can't see your work as super precious in that way. But I feel like I am burning so many fires right now, or I have so many plates. And then on top of all of that, it's the pandemic and its disproportionate effect on people of color and Black people, my family members. It's this economic downturn that's created so much insecurity, of unemployment, thinking about my friends and where they are in their lives. I feel like oftentimes I don't have the space to actually be an artist. And that's really hard, because being an artist is it's one of the most central aspects of my identity. And I feel like I didn't get a chance to explore that until a couple of years ago, when I moved to Poughkeepsie actually, and found such a receptive community there. But with everything that's going on, I feel like it's getting less and less space in my life, unfortunately.
But I think what you're saying, though, is, everything that an artist does, whether, they say they're always a painter and they don't have time to get into their studio, but I have seen this over the years. An artist is an artist is an artist. Everything they do has an artist's eye set on it, whether they are working at a job in admin or whether they are taking time to raise children or any of those things that a lot of times, you know, maybe a male artist is not going to have to consider it nearly as much. Going back, you know, so every one of you have mentioned something I think that's really startling and interesting, and that is building the community that you need, that you want to live in, but also that you really need for your own success. So I think that that's a really, that's quite startling. I've never thought about it quite so abruptly, that how important that is. I know that in Poughkeepsie, we meet up every week, which some people are astounded at that, but we meet up because we want to see each other and we want to talk about what we're doing. And I think that that's a community that we have built. So every single one of you have built this community where you're starting, whether you're starting out or whether you're just creating something that's good for you to make you thrive as an artist. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about just the communities that you're living within now, and maybe if you have some grand vision of where you'd like to go next in your community creating. I would love to hear that, because of all things I know, it's artists are visionaries. Kara?
I just wanted to say, I specifically chose to wear my Celebrate Women 845 shirt. I don't know if you can read it.
Nice.
They're a collective in the Hudson Valley. I'm not directly affiliated with them, but I'm a strong supporter. And also women's work is in Poughkeepsie, and they're amazing. And I feel so grateful to have that community around. And then my very own sister, who is an incredibly talented artist who's way beyond me in skill and vision and everything. She is actually in the process of starting her own queer women of color artists collective. And that's a community that I'm really looking forward to seeing grow and support. Probably more from an admin side though, but yeah.
That's great. Does anybody else care to share any like visions where they're going next or what you're building?
I'll chime in briefly. I mean, it's a tricky time to look forward, but
yeah,
one of the things we discovered when we took all of our stuff online was that we had a kind of a surge of engagement. And so while there's certainly like a challenge in trying to explain to people like what the lab does, if they're not there kind of physically and aren't able to like see our shows, in terms of community of the future, I am excited about spreading, and we've already got some ideas in the hopper about being able to send shows to different cities virtually and invite people in from across the country or even across the world in a way that we never would, because we just felt so Hudson Valley based. It's kind of fun to think that we could be international or national. I mean, that's really big thinking, but that's what this time has kind of planted for us. And then on a sort of micro level, you know, one of the things that is our founding principle is that we try to reduce as many barriers to performance and to participation in performance as possible. And so we don't ever hold auditions. We only ever ask people who want to participate with us to just show up and commit to a rehearsal schedule. And so that has really defined our community, which means that everyone who is in a lab show is self-selecting. There is no person up here saying, you're good, you're not good, you have experience, you don't. We just say, come. And so we have a pretty exciting community, which is nicely reflected in our last project, which is our 9-episode soap opera. So I can talk about later.
I've got to see those. I hope they're online, so I would love to see. Excellent. Nancy, do you, or Julia, do you?
Well, I was thinking of the excitement and exuberance that the younger women have. and trying to place myself at that age. And it was so different because so many doors were closed to us. So that we had to battle for expressing ourselves. And it's kind of exciting to see how it's all opened up. How the Me Too movement has gotten validation for so many.
Yeah.
And
I have embraced doing community-based art.
special thing. Sorry, Julia, I didn't hear you.
Me either. I didn't hear myself. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Nancy.
I think we had a little blip in the internet connection.
Oh, okay. I just didn't understand. I want to hear what you have to say, Julia. So that's why I asked you. That's all.
Well, you know, I started engaging with young scholars maybe about 7 years ago. Young women and young men studying to become academics. And I found that combination of art making and academics important because it is about recording history. And I feel very strongly that the history has to be there and recorded so that it is validated generations after we are gone. So I spend a lot of time with archivists and people doing master's and PhD programs to make sure that they have a sense of what came before them. You know, look back so you can move forward. So that's a very new community for me. And I'm very fond of young scholars because they're highly creative like artists are, but their form of expression are words and concepts. So I'm finding that to be very important because I feel that we have to be down in history. We have to be, that's how I feel we will have mattered, not just by the work, because my work could be in a museum, my work could be in somebody's private home, but what is written and accessible to fourth graders and high school kids and collectors, that has become very important to me because if it's recorded and it's part of history, then it cannot be erased.
I agree.
So much of our trajectory as women artists has not been recorded. I mean, the 9th Street Women is the first compilation about women artists that's been comprehensive, and it just came out.
Yes. True.
So that starts validating women in the arts. So I have seen this connection between history and art making. So I am engaged with the scholastic and scholarly community.
Yes, because years ago we didn't even think to put years on the announcements. But now, 30, 40 years later, I try to remember, we have to sit down and remember what year it was, because that's how little we kind of, we understood about ourselves and how much value we gave to ourselves at that point. Although we knew that we had a lot of value through the consciousness raising experience. But it was something none of us thought about, or many. So we spend a lot of time now trying to go back through the years and see what year it was, which is kind of that something was in 1973 or 1977, and excitement of that discovery but it wasn't something we thought about then. And historians that I knew then were beginning to try to make that sort of, I guess the word is stick or take, or really give a place in history for us. And it was tough, but it happened. And when women say there's not much change and everything, no, there's a great deal of change. It's not enough. You can't change, I don't know, millenniums and millenniums of oppression in 20, 30, 40 years, but you can certainly begin to make that switch. And that's the exciting part. Intergenerationally, I mean, it's kind of wonderful to hear the younger generation speak about this whole future. So.
Yeah, that is beautifully put, Nancy. Thank you. I know that I look back and I think sometimes that things haven't changed very much, but they have. But there's still a long way to go before I think women's place in the world and their stature in being accorded expert status in the artistry that they produce, whether they are an actor or a painter or, it's been well documented in museums that women's work is not collected as much and it doesn't make as much, it doesn't go for as much in auctions. I don't know in the performing world if that is, I'm guessing it's the same, but Liz, maybe you could weigh in on that and educate me on that, because I do see that the work of women seems to continually be devalued. And please.
A lot of, so in the world of performance, and you have commercial performance and you have, more performance art, it's obviously a very huge umbrella. And while some, as we can all just probably imagine, a very famous female actress might command quite as much money as their male counterpart, what is reflected is more who's directing, who's making those decisions, and who's casting. And for the most part, it is fewer and fewer women who are in those decision-making roles, regardless of who's actually in front of the camera. My path was always to be in front of the camera. That was the goal, to be an actor, and that's what I studied, and that's what I really, really wanted to do. But the prevailing message that you get if you really try to be a commercial actor and really try and make a living doing that is no. It's just, that's the prevailing message for most of us. It's just, nope, you're never going to make a living doing that. So I think to speak to those, to the decision makers. And so for me, I only started directing 4 or 5 years ago, and came to it with such ease and delight, never having thought that I could be a director, because most of the directors I've ever worked with, not all of them, but most of them have always been men, and many of my teachers were men, and I was like, I'm going to be an actor. Directing is for someone else, I guess. And then just very briefly, there's, I think about this a lot, is, the movie Sunset Boulevard, about this, ancient actress who, her career is gone, and but in that movie, she's 40. Her actual age is 40. I'm 42. Like, can you imagine me playing that character? Anyway, I think about that in relationship to aging, and as I am getting, we're all aging, everyone's aging, but like that, as I'm coming into more power and a little bit more autonomy and a little bit more of a voice, I like to think about that movie a lot, about what was expected, that you just shrivel up at 40. That's the expected. If you're not beautiful anymore in the performing industry, you're done, and you better go find a really creepy house to go live in.
Oh God.
And that's kind of a positive story, I love that I'm older than she was supposed to be.
I think that's a really interesting correlation. I never realized that she was only 42. Oh my goodness. But going back again to, I guess, remembering the history and writing the history as we see it, I think that's one of the most important things that artists can do, is their work records what is happening at that time period in their lives. I think if they're doing honest, amazing work, then yes, you can look at it and you can say, yeah, that was happening then. So how do artists find or become mentors to bring up the new leaders of women that are going to lead the way and, you know, be the artists that are going to write that history? I feel like that's a question, and I see within many of you, you're already, you've either done it or you're taking the lead on it. So I commend you, because I know that's one of the most important things we can all do, is to bring up the next generation, to give them guidance. When Julia was talking about the young scholars, that's something that I have noticed as well. And I love that, because it feels like they're bringing together two separate points that have always been forced apart. And finally, it becomes something that's real, three-dimensional. So, you know, we need a little bit more of that. So I'd love to open it up for any questions or any further comments from any of our panelists before we get going with questions.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, Kara, please.
I wanted to just wholeheartedly second Julia's comment about the archives and the scholarship. My graduate degree is actually in archiving and cultural heritage preservation. And that, I mean, it was a huge driving force for me, studying Black studies in college, and then realizing that so much of that history, like the stuff that you base your research on, it had to be generated like in the moment for so long, like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, like all of this like scholarship that's the foundation of Black studies was created in that time. And it really made it real for me that in order for us to have like generations and generations being able to study back hundreds and hundreds of years ago, I mean, people have to be, one, like recognizing that something is of value to keep, and then they have to be maintaining that material. They have to be compiling it, preserving it physically, but also like the learnings from that. And now that we're in the digital age, there's all these new tools that you can use, the oral histories that you can preserve digitally, like all these things that we can have. So we have the stuff to research into, to make those connections. So every generation of Black artists, of marginalized artists, they're not starting over, we're constantly building. That's so important. Like so many of these other artistic traditions, they have hundreds, thousands of years of their work recorded, medieval art, drawing lines like that. But
yeah,
that doesn't exist for so many of us. We can go back 100 years, maybe 200 years, like all the research that's making those connections further back and even in the present, it's happening right now still. There's so much that's unexplored. I think that's super important. I'm really glad that you brought that up and that you are discussing the value in that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Julia?
Yeah, I just want to say that each one of us is standing on the shoulders of the previous generation. And with that clarity, I understand that when I meet a young artist who's female, I'm mentoring someone who lives in Germany now. And I don't know her, but I love her art. And she's alone in her studio trying to connect dots and find her way in the world. And it's easy for me to say, your work looks good, keep it up, call that magazine, just tell her some things that she may not understand that would be helpful to her as she moves forward. Because we work alone in our craft, but maybe not in theater, but a lot of our studio practices, we're alone. And when you're young and you're alone, trying to make sense of where you're going next, it's very important to have someone who's older say, you're going in the right direction, keep it up, try this, that's not working, go here, go there. I don't mind doing that because I understand that person needs it and that's the future, you know. And as far as documenting and keeping history and creating history, I mean, someone came up to me and said, oh, you were not a founding member of the Alto Chavon School of Design. And I had to pull up my ID card with the date and say, yes, I was. So here was someone telling me in my face that my history was not what it was. And that's how things get changed. And that's why I am very, very vigilant about what really happened, who's telling the story, and are you supporting someone else who's going to continue that story? So there is a very strong connection. I stand on the shoulders of other women are going to stand on my shoulders, and that's how it's going to get done, because we don't always have the support. It's not like, oh, knock on my door and we're going to find a scholarship for you, we're going to do this for you, we're going to get a job for you. No one's really doing that. So we have to do it for ourselves. We have to take care of the younger generation in a way that would help them fulfill their vision, because their vision is what's going to be next.
Yep. Their vision is already happening. And it's exciting to see little glimpses of it now and then. And I'm really grateful for all the artists that are in our community. Thank you, that was very well put. So would anybody, any panelists have any last words before we open it up for questions? Okay, so if
I think that,
yes, go ahead, Nancy.
I think it would be good to talk about, maybe not now because it's a big topic, but the intergenerational differences and similarities, and the kind of the way the younger generation looks at things and the kind of art they're making, relationship to what we make. Because there is a bit of a vast difference in some cases. And their attitude about selling their work and their attitude about galleries and the conventional form of showing work that we have just basically accepted as an art world, which is now by and large close to being at the of these this young generation group. So I think it might be that, because it's so short, the amount of time that you have, that's a whole big topic of discussion, which I think would be very exciting.
That is a really big topic. We've kind of touched on it a little bit, but would anybody like to comment on that? Because I know exactly what you're saying. There's a totally different set of eyes on what their work is going to be going forward. It is not the story that a lot of the artists that have been practicing for 30, 40 years had as their mantra. It's totally different now. I think the whole thing about the brick and mortar galleries and having a dealer that promotes your work and all that stuff, you know, it's just gone. it's still kind of hanging like a lingering myth.
Or may be reinvented that still has a connection to what it was. But in the transitional period, these kinds of things often get thrown away and then maybe work their way back or connect in new ways. So I think that could very well be the case. And I would love to explore more with the younger generation, or about how the younger generation perceives and sees things. I mean, after all, to grow up with the computer is alone a whole different world. I mean, it's such a struggle for me. And for a 4 or 5 year old, because I have a grandchild, at 4 years old, she was already having a great time correcting me and indignant that I didn't know these different, what she considered very simple steps. So, we have a different world and a different group of women. If these women feel entitled to be who they are and entitled within themselves, and I think that's so exciting and so much worthy of having long conversations about. That's all.
Yeah, I do. I understand what you're saying, because I grew up in the feminism was just breaking out of its, the word was new and people were throwing it around, and it was the 70s. And, now I think there is a different brand of feminist, and maybe it is that there is a belief that they are truly equal, and maybe they are surprised to learn that they are not being considered as equal. I don't know if any of the younger panelists would like to comment on that, but it's interesting how things have flopped. They've kind of gone like this. So
look at the Congress, the women like AOC and some of those congressional women. I mean, I'm speechless when they question one of those traditional type senators or Congress people or big thing, but exciting that they feel within themselves the permission to be able to do that. It's kind of wonderful.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying that myself. Thank you for bringing that up. I wish, that would be another hour or so, I think. But that would be a great discussion, and maybe we should keep meeting up and pushing these discussions ahead, because it is exciting to look at the future. But I do believe that we all need to remember what the history is and think about that we are standing on the shoulders of generations of women that have kind of fought for every little tiny piece of creative freedom that they have. So, all right, well, I'm gonna, who in the audience has a burning question that they would love to chat with our amazing panelists with? Just raise your hand or do this and unmute yourself. Sabrina, are you waving something at us, or is that?
No, I've just enjoyed this a lot and wrote down a lot of things that inspired me for possible future work. But I guess I feel like I'm in a dilemma. For those of you that don't know, I'm a sculptor, and trying to battle this new world and figure out what scale work I should be doing, what's going to communicate best. I mean, I'm thinking public art really will get to more people, and but yet I have a love to do some other stuff, and I'm very, very much in transition of trying to figure some stuff out that way. You know, the gallery scene, now you apply and they want a picture and they do a virtual thing, and you know, that's the world we have. That's what it is. For a sculptor, it's like, it's really difficult to look at your work as a flat picture. So anyway, that's it for me, just sharing with you. You guys are great, though. It's been lovely listening to all of you.
I'll just second that, Sabrina, that I've only ever directed theater, and directing something that now looks like TV or video or is like, I don't even know how to, it's a whole different set of skills, and I don't even know if I really want those skills. That's not what excites me about the art form. It's the energy and the people and the chemistry and the composition and the sound and all the stuff that gets so flattened. So, you know, just it's a weird, kind of a weird place to be. And actually, I'm also oddly wondering about private performance versus public performance, community things versus, just because, you know, artists got to work. So like, I don't care if it's 3 people seeing my stuff or 100 and scalability. I'm not sure where that's going to go, but.
Right. And this hybrid is very interesting, of what Paola and Mary and their spouses have helped a lot with this, the first I've seen. I hate
Not my spouse, clarify.
okay. Of this hybrid of having some people live in person meeting up, and then a group, you know, on Zoom. Last night I was at Gallery 330 in person, and there was like, I don't know, 12 or 15 other people there. It was a lovely time, lovely event, and it's an interesting hybrid. So we'll see what happens with that. But for theater, I think that could be really cool, and that's what it was last night. There was theater performed in Queen City, broadcast in a center, whatever the word would be in this world, to, you know, to where we could watch it on the screen in Gallery 330. It's very interesting, the whole concept and how it worked, but I think it went really well.
I was just teasing about my husband, but I think that I see it's a very interesting behavior from different artists, because there are artists that are excited by this new opportunity that you see. You know, it just happened that we had to, but you actually can leverage that as a new opportunity and build that as part of the new vision or your presentation layer, okay? But there is a lot of resistance also from other artists where they say, oh, this is not what I wanted to do. And it's very hard in a certain way to negotiate the two worlds, because it looks like they're going farther apart from each other.
Yeah.
And so I think the technology in a certain way is becoming, independently of what kind of art form we do, the technology is becoming more interlaying with our work, especially with the presentation aspect of ourselves.
Yeah.
I wanted to respond to,
yeah, and for some reason I believe that people think that women are less technology oriented than men, and so forth. We get in trouble.
Yeah, that's true. Kara, you had a comment?
Yeah, well, I first just want to just nod vehemently to like women being perceived as like not being with the technology. It's like, come on now, like it's 2020, like so many women have been innovating for so many years. Like that's a huge pet peeve of mine. But I wanted to go back to Nancy's comment about the differences in the generations, because I took a bit of time while everyone was talking to think about it, and like what my friends who are artists from like all different art forms are like thinking about. And 3 things that really stick out to me were, 1, like the digital art and like technology realm that you guys have been talking about, like so much more digital art, and then friends who usually work with physical mediums who are now transitioning to digital, just like as an in the meantime thing, when they're not able to go into their studios, or when they're like collaborating. A lot of collective work as well, like working together with larger groups of people. And then interdisciplinarity has been a huge thing. Like none of the artists that I know around my age consider themselves as just one type of discipline. Like they're all working across disciplines. Like like they're writing TV shows, and they're also like painters, and they're also like sculptors, and like they're performance artists. Like my sister is a choreographer, dancer, like painter. Like there's all these different like forms of expression that are still like within one like artistic vision, but just taking so many different forms. And I've seen that a lot. And then there's also, I think, and you know, being so young, like correct me if I'm wrong, but there's like this, I feel in my generation, like this aversion to like commercialism and like making art for the market, and like just like this, it is like just a hate of like selling out and like making art for like the white box. Like that is like, that is death. Even though it's like success, it's also like death for the artist. And so like the struggling artist still being worn as like a badge of pride is like it, but also wanting to like make it and be in the magazines and have the big shows and all. So there's like a really real tension, I think, in my generation of artists that I've seen.
Thanks, Kara. That's perfectly said. I think that, and that's the change that Nancy was talking about that she observes, and I know I've seen it myself, but that's very well put. Thank you. I think we're about ready to wrap up the evening. Does anybody have any last questions for the panelists or comments or anything? Emily, unmute yourself, and nice to see you.
Hi, Linda. First, I just wanted to say how excited I am to see young, talented people moving to Poughkeepsie. Yes, that's wonderful. And I'm wondering, I mean, it's just amazing that Poughkeepsie's art community has been so strong for a long time, meeting up every week. This is really making me feel like maybe we need to have a women's group in Poughkeepsie where we're like supporting each other, looking for opportunities for each other. I don't know, I just wanted to throw that out there because it can be a very solitary thing. And of course, right now it's kind of a weird time to start a group, but eventually it would be so exciting to be able to do that locally. And, you know, talk through things like this. The fact that this panel has been intergenerational, I think has brought up something that Kara spoke to just now, and a few of you have touched on, but I feel like the art of today is moving further and further away from the commercial zone too, which is like hugely exciting to me because it kind of, it doesn't make any sense to me to like, with the things that art is really all about is really kind of the antithesis of commercialism. And so I'm really curious about how everyone feels about art being more kind of community-based, moving out of gallery spaces and maybe back into the forest or into the supermarket, or like into kind of public spaces which are accessible to not just gallery visitors and museum visitors and people of culture, you know, whatever that means. That I feel like that's such a strong, exciting trend in contemporary art, and I'm just wondering if anyone would like to speak to that.
I have a lot of ideas about performances in parking lots.
Oh, great.
Which I think we have so many. They're huge. They're never full.
Awesome.
But
That's really interesting, Liz. About 4 or 5 years ago, we did a production right after we moved into that giant strip mall, and it was Shakespeare in the parking lot. And we, you can imagine Andres Simeon and his little troupe, and we put on this Shakespeare production, and it was out in the parking lot, and it was hilarious and wonderful. And I'm totally all for it. I think art needs to be brought into the community, and the community needs to ask for what they want, or they need to say, no, we don't like this, we want something else. Julia, I saw you mentioned you had your hand up.
Well, you know, I just wanted to say that in reality, there's a lot of power that we have as women. And when I think about like big acting stars who are female, who have the same issues that maybe we have as visual artists, who are producing their own work, who are creating their production companies, who are writing stories about women, you know, or people of color who are beginning thinking about that. Because, you know, if we take the reins, and I think this time is actually incredibly liberating, because Zoom will take us to anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
It's not just us in the parking lot. It's us in Russia or Italy or Tokyo. I don't know. The truth is there are some huge portals that are open, but we have to claim our strength. And we have to claim our clarity. One of the things that feminism did is that it made women stronger, and it actually confused a lot of men. There's a lot of confused men out there. And everybody, you know, they're all trying to hold on to something that has shifted. I'd like to look at what is the opportunity that is being offered, and what can we take control of that becomes our voice in this moment with this venue.
Yes. That's all I have to say. Yes. Eve Metalagoidia mentioned in the chat box that if anybody does not know about Art Place America and creative placemaking, that's something you can Google and find out some really amazing programs that have happened across the United States, around the world. It's really very fun. So if anybody has any last comments or questions, I think we should probably wrap it up. I'm loath to let everybody go, but I know it's getting to be a little bit late, so.
So I wanted to say thank you to everybody. I want to say thank you to the Barrett Art Center, to Joanna Frank, our executive director, for hosting this, to Linda, the panelists, and everybody that was able to join us.